And now it's time to catch up with the Purple team and find out what's going on in Central Florida. And to do that, we catch up with our oracle of everything Orlando City, Mike Gramajo, WESH-TV, down there in Orlando. Mike, it's postseason time. We had to give you a buzz.
Yeah, no, it's already here so fast. It feels like the regular season just started, just yesterday. But obviously, we're already mid October, end of October, and then some playoff soccer now, and we'll see how the Lions really do this postseason after a really disappointing decision day result against Toronto.
All right, so you're reading my notes, and so what we'll do is we'll start with the most recent activity, go backward, and work our way back forward in a circle, going up against Chicago here. Reason we are talking to you today instead of on Friday is because of what happened on decision day, and all of the math and the machinations and everything means that you're now a part of the 8-9, and Orlando drops all the way to the 9, has to go on the road. Run through decision day for me and how frustrating it was.
Yeah, no, I mean, you really think about it, John. This, I mean, the performance and just the result, as disappointing as both were, it really is just a continuation of what we've been able to see from this Orlando squad in the last run of games. It's interesting because when you reached out to me to talk about postseason, I'm like, it's been a minute since I've been on soccer down here, and I remember the last time I was on the show was previewing the Atlanta United game, and that got me to think. I think that game is when things started to come out as far as some vulnerabilities that this team has. And as you can recall in that Atlanta Orlando game, Atlanta ended up winning 3-2. Believe they got a stoppage time goal in that game against Orlando. And from that point on, Orlando went into League's Cup. They had a good outing. Obviously, the Miami game didn't go in their favor. Obviously, you can kind of cite other outside reasons for that the team usually contests. But after the League's Cup, it seemed like things were just showing more frequently than often. Um, we talk about what happened in this Toronto game. Yes, you can kind of point out certain things. Obviously, Orlando was missing their starting center back in Robin Janssen. They were missing their starting midfielders or in Cesar. Well, Cesar Araujo was in the bench, but the other starting midfielder who was now out with an ACL, Jaron Gerbet, was also out. So they were missing a key presence in that midfield. And then as far as their attack, that's been another area of concern because they've been in a nicer way. They haven't been as aggressive as we've seen them earlier in the season. So all of that against a Toronto team that really had nothing to play for, and we saw what happened. Toronto really exposed Orlando, pounded them. It could have been more, I think. Now you kind of have to also add Orlando did have a lot of shots, a lot of opportunities at goal, but they were going up against a Sean Johnson that he's a veteran goalkeeper that you can't really you shouldn't be surprised when a goalkeeper of that stature is able to put up a performance like that. So disappointing, and now they they've dropped to the ninth, as you mentioned. Now they're gonna have to go on the road and see if they can get through a really tough Chicago squad.
I'm looking at the numbers now for the first time, and what you were describing to me is now sinking in. 31 shots to 12, 10 of them on target compared to 6. 31 shots and 10 on target. What
Yeah.
is that?
That's just a team that either was trying to really just find something. And when you have that amount of volume uh, generated in a game, somehow the soccer gods have to let you get a goal in. And it wasn't the case. Toronto was, from just looking at the game from that perspective, Toronto was just a very well disciplined team defensively. And I think other teams have been able to pick that up when they're playing against an Orlando team. If you're a team that's defensively solid throughout the 90 minutes, it can really, really just change the dynamic of the game. Granted, Toronto was able to score about 7 minutes early into the game. That gave them the advantage. They scored again in the first half, and then Orlando found itself a mountain to climb. And mind you, this was a game that Orlando was deeming a quote unquote must win, because it was a must win at the end of the day. It was, you win, you avoid the wild card game, you avoid playing that added game in the postseason, and it came short. And then when you look at just how things have been in the last stretch of games, the last 7 games before this, this game against Chicago, it's only 1 win in their last 7 games. So that just shows you how, how bad of a form this team is. They're struggling, obviously. Could this be a new approach? You usually hear teams when they go into the postseason, it's a postseason, it's a new season, fresh slate, but it's win or go home now at this point. And granted, if they are able to get through Chicago, they're obviously gonna host 1 game at home because it's the best of 3. But granted, if it goes to a game 3 now, you're gonna either go to Cincinnati or well, you're gonna go to Philadelphia. So, but that's just the reality. That's just the reality when you put on that much of a performance and you come up short, unfortunately.
Going back to those last 7 that you were talking about, Leagues Cup, a 2-1 loss to LAG, draw at Audi Field with DC United, the 1 win that you were talking about, the 3-2 shootout with Nashville, 1-1 draw with Cincinnati, 1-1 draw with Columbus. So it's kind of a transitive hell is real by playing each one back-to-back. 2-1 loss to Vancouver, and then the 4-2 loss to Toronto. In the past, and this is going back a handful of years, we have noticed that Orlando City, under Oscar Pareja, they'll hit a certain point, and then it would be, okay, we know we're in the playoffs, and then you kind of taper off a little bit heading into the postseason, and then, it turns into whatever it is. You stumble, you make your way through, you grind your way out of a result, then you go into the second round, and you go from there. Last couple of seasons, Oscar Pareja went against that, and it was pedal down. All right, fine, we're in. So what? Let's do what we got to do and keep the pressure on. And it was a more consistent effort going into the postseason. This season, it seems to have gone back to that original model. Were you getting that same kind of a vibe that those of us outside Central Florida were, where it's like, okay, we know we're in, and then you kind of like, and you go down the roller coaster and you're back into the valley again? What was your thought on that idea of initially it was like that, then last couple of seasons even keeled, now you went back to the original? Are you getting that same vibe?
I don't think so, because obviously, just being out in the training grounds every week and just seeing how the team is like, obviously the vibes are positive amongst the players, amongst the coach. They, that you can't ignore, and obviously we only have this short amount of window when we go out to the training grounds to see what the team is like. But considering how the team has been the last 7 games of the regular season, and each week I've been out there, it's been positive vibes. I mean, yeah, despite the results haven't been in their favor, but I said a really interesting quote in the game before the Toronto game. Obviously, I already mentioned, he said that it's a must-win game, but he also did mention that when we've shown we've been a top team in the past, and when we've shown that we're down on the ground, we've shown that we're capable of getting back up and fighting again. I'm paraphrasing, by the way, but
No worries, it's all good.
But that's what he was basically saying in those lines, saying that when people count us out, we're able to get back up and really go swinging again. Is that possible going into this postseason? Likely, but there's other scenarios of reality that surround that from thinking otherwise. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility that this team can go on a deep playoff run, considering they're now going to have to play a really long playoff run. But they could still make a historic run. I mean, you can't discard that from the realm of possibility. They what's to say that they beat Chicago, they upset Philadelphia, they're likely they'll play Miami, and then they make it to MLS Cup. What's to say that's not happening? But you look at the outside factors, as I was kind of alluding to. There's a lot of injuries in this team. Robin Janssen, Now we don't know how long his injury is. He wasn't in the game against Toronto. It's unclear if he's going to play against Chicago. It showed in that Toronto game that without Robin Janssen and the type of leadership that he brings in that back line, there are some vulnerabilities that the team has shown. The team did bring in a new left back in Spanish. They brought in a Spanish left back in Adrian Marin, who, he's still adapting. He still hasn't really meshed in and really lived up to the expectations. But granted, he just got here just about a month and a half ago, so that's expected of him. But then you see the midfield. Cesar Araujo, who's been banged up for most of the year, hasn't been very consistent. So it's been really Eduardo Tuesta, who was another midfielder going into the season that no one expected him to start. Because, before the season even started, your starting midfield duo was Cesar Araujo and Wilder Cartagena. We already know what happened to Cartagena. He got injured in preseason and was out for the rest. He's still out for the rest of the season. Then you had, the rookie in Jeron Gerbet, who came from Clemson. Really impressive rookie season, considering, the types of injuries he's had to deal with. But even when he wasn't injured, he was able to really contribute positively in the midfield. Oscar really kind of just drew a lot of praise for him. But now he tore his ACL not too long ago, and now he's out. So now you have a lack of depth really in that midfield. And then when it comes to the attacking side of things, the three DPs have really done a lot this year. You can't discard that. I believe they have more than 60 to 70 goal contributions. I don't remember the math, but that's just, amongst the three DPs to have 60 plus goal contributions, that says a lot. That means they were producing. However, when you look at these last run of games, it hasn't really showed. Obviously, Martino Ojeda has gone dry a little bit. Luis Riel, their DP starting striker, he hasn't scored in about 4 games in his last 4 games. And not even that. He's been relegated to the bench now. It's Duncan McGuire getting the start. But Duncan McGuire just came back from a really long injury not so long ago. So to say Duncan McGuire is fully back, I think he's still working there. He did get a goal in the game against Toronto, granted, but it's still. And then obviously Marco Pasalic, he's you can only do so much as a winger as far as really helping generate goals. I mean, he did get that assist in that Toronto game. So there are possibilities that this team can go on a deep run. There are possibilities that this team is, not really putting, not throwing in the towel, but the outside realities usually can kind of overshadow what's expected of this team, as far as going into this game against Chicago.
To do the math, and while you were talking, I found the math. So 66 is the number. So it was Ojeda with 16 and 15, top MLS Best 11 talent. Muriel 9 and 9, Pasalic 12 and 5. So that's 37 and 29 for Orlando City coming into this game, and that's your regular season numbers. What kind of a matchup are you anticipating against the Greg Berhalter-led Chicago Fire? Because we know that they have Zinkernagel and the attack that is there, and Hugo Kuipers. What kind of a matchup are you anticipating going on the road, taking on that Chicago team?
That's a good question, because if it's a short turnaround. I mean, you think about it. This is a team that just played Saturday. They need to figure out what they did wrong. I think they know what they did wrong, but they turned that around. And you got to give credit where credit is due. Greg Berhalter has really turned this Chicago team around a lot. I don't think Chicago had the result. They didn't have the result they wanted, perhaps also on decision day, because that was a little bit of a nail biter scene. Columbus, Orlando, and Chicago really kind of see. You kind of just saw the
take swings at each other, and you're sitting there and you're looking at that board and you're going, okay, you're one of those.
But you have to give credit where credit's due. Greg Berhalter has done a lot to really just turn this Chicago team around. I didn't expect Chicago to make the playoffs, and here they are. But what's it going to take, right? Listen, this Chicago team in this Berhalter Chicago team has shown that they can beat Orlando. I mean, last time Chicago came to Orlando was earlier this summer, and they clobbered Orlando 3-1. So if if Chicago goes up against an Orlando team that one is still banged up or an Orlando team that's still depleted with injuries, and two still show that they are very vulnerable in various parts of the field, especially in that defensive end. I mean, this could be a win. This could be a win for Chicago. I mean, unless Orlando's is producing on all cylinders, and this is from being a team that's defensively strong, a team that is offensive minded and able to really put in that final pass. Because that's another thing too that's kind of deterred Orlando from even getting that extra point. That they haven't been able to have that final punch, as Oscar Pereira says. But if Orlando's able to really just produce on all ends and all cylinders, yes, this could be a result that favors Orlando. But if reality and for consistency stakes, this continues to be an ongoing trend for Orlando, this could be a walk in the park for Chicago, the way things are looking like.
You mentioned the starting lineup, so just for folks who may not have had your game on speed dial on decision day, here's what the lineup was for Toronto. Obviously, you had Gillespie and net, left to right at the back. Marin, who only went 45 minutes, picked up the yellow card, I think, 34th minute, and then lasted the first half, and Tyree Spicer came in the second half. Brecalo in for Janssen, Schlegel, Freeman. That was your backline. Marin, Brecalo, Schlegel, and Freeman before the subs. Your attack, Angulo, Atuesta, Smith, and Pasalic, and then up top, Ojeda and McGuire. You mentioned not knowing necessarily the health of Robin Janssen and missing the intangibles and what he means to the back. Would you then anticipate the same kind of a thing on a short term where it's Marin at the left, Brecalo, Schlegel, and Freeman, and then keeping an eye on Marin to figure out, okay, how many minutes can you give me? If you can give me 45 or more, you start. If not, then it's something different there at the back?
Yeah, I think that could be it. I mean, but considering that Marin was substituted in at halftime, and you can kind of say, you can kind of maybe look at the yellow card that he picked up, but that's not an Oscar move. I mean, if your player's sitting on the yellow, you don't substitute them out at halftime just for that, But I think there's other reasons why. One lineup could be the same back line that we saw against Toronto. If that's not the case, I wouldn't be surprised if Oscar goes with a three back, and you have Alex Freeman play more as a wing back, and you have Ivan Angulo also playing as a wing back, and then your three guys in the back will probably be David Brecalo, Rodrigo Schlegel, and I don't know, Kyle Smith maybe that it's thrown in there. So, but and that's just in the realm of this team doesn't go with its traditional four back, and if Robin Janssen is still out for that game, so this
nothing like the questions on a short term, huh?
No, I mean it's a short turnaround, and for Oscar's sake, he has to kind of, it's his job to really kind of solve the problem with only 2-3 days of preparation. So it's quite a task, and it's kind of like a game of chess, because what are you have to ask yourself, what is Chicago going to come out with, and if that's the case, we've seen what Chicago can be like, and the dangers they can pose to an Orlando team.
All right, if you would please, sir, cut the promo for me, and so everyone can keep an eye on you on social and with all of the coverage that you give down there at WESH-TV about what's going on with Major League Soccer. Hit me. Let me know.
So obviously you can find me over at obviously on X Twitter at by Mike Gramajo, over at WESH.com, WESH.com/sports. We have had basically content on Orlando City and Orlando Pride of the NWSL basically all season long. So continuous coverage. Obviously, we're going to be paying attention to the game on Wednesday. I'll have live commentary on Twitter X, and we'll see what happens, because it's going to be a game where really the postseason's here. Win or go home. Can Orlando win? Can they not? If they win, then they have a huge daunting task against a Philadelphia team that is, they've shown that they can do it. But if they lose, it continues the ongoing trend of a disappointing end to a season in which high hopes were for an Orlando team.
Mike, as always, great to see you, my friend. We'll be keeping an eye on the 8-9 game and obviously catching up with you on the flip side when it comes to continuing postseason roster decisions, because we know that the 26th season will be here before we know it. Great to see you, my friend. Don't be a stranger.